I was born again into a war I didn't see. Lines were drawn the moment grace found me. Not of flesh, not of blood, but a battle for my soul. The enemy wants the trust that makes me whole. But I remember the blood, I remember the cost. Christ bore the weight, restored what was lost. I will not forget my first love, my King. I rise today in the strength He brings. I'm fit for the fight through His power and might, strengthened each day in the grace of Christ. With the armor of truth and the word as my sword, I stand unshaken, a soldier of the Lord. I will endure, I will believe, for the victory is already achieved.
Hold your Bibles to 1 Samuel chapter 22. I started this message last time we were live. I want to continue it. Something I really never preached on before. We're looking at David in the cave of Adullam. That needs to be pointed out. Like I said previously, David was in a desperate time, doing desperate things. He finally winds up at the cave of Adullam, and about 400 other individuals that were just as desperate also came to the cave. People that were, I'll just read it. Now David therefore departed thence and escaped to the cave of Adullam, and when his brethren and all his father's house heard it, they went down thither to him. Remember, David's on the run from Saul. He runs to Gath. Well, first he goes to Nob. Nob is just around the area of Jerusalem. And I think it's not by accident that he stopped at Nob, and I'll tell you why here in a second. And then he goes southeast down to Gath. He figures that he could hide in Gath where the Philistines were, the location where Goliath lived before he took off his head in a battle between Goliath and David. And then after playing like an insane person, because he was noticed, he flees to the cave of Adullam. Other, let's just say have-nots, also heard that he was there, and they all met up there together. Now David therefore departed thence and escaped to the cave of Adullam, and with his brethren and all his father's house heard it. They went down thither to him, and everyone that was in distress, everyone that was in dire straits and in anguish, everyone that was in debt, just like I said, or just as I said last Monday evening, these are people that ran out of money, they borrowed money, and now they can't pay back the money. And in those days, if you couldn't pay back the money, they could take you, your family, and sell you into slavery. And everyone that was discontented gathered themselves unto him, and he became a captain over them. And there with him about 400 men. And as I stated, David needed rehabilitation. There's no doubt about it. It was not the same David that was tending sheep. At this point, it was not the same David that killed Goliath. It's not the same David that was battling Israel's enemies. This was David on the run. This was David being fearful. Fear of his life. He left palace. He went to palace to the cave. Left a wife behind. Left his best friend David behind. I mean, not David, Jonathan. Thank God for Jonathan, because Jonathan gave him a heads up and said, you better get out of here because my father is going to kill you. For no reason at all, except Saul was jealous of David and demon-possessed, in my opinion. So David winds up in this cave. In fact, let me put the pictures up of that cave again. That's inside of that cave. That cave itself holds about 40 people. Now there's other locations around that holds additional people, but this is just the cave of Adullam. Go to the next picture. That's the entrance. That's the hole in the ground cave. From palace to that. For no apparent reason except Saul was jealous of David and what he was accomplishing and how the people loved him, because he was victorious in battles. He was slaying Israel's enemies left and right. Now all those rocks you see there in the background, building blocks, that's a tomb that was built much later next to that cave. But that was the hole in the ground cave that David went to. And that's where the other 400 men met up with him. That's where his father and mother were taken, David's father and mother. And eventually he would travel southwest and go to the En-Gedi area of Israel, or Israel type of Jordan type of situation right now, as far as the way the geographical lines are drawn. But that's where he spent approximately 9 months going in and out of this cave, living out of this cave. 9 months in a cave. Nine months of rehabilitation, not just for himself, not just 9 months of restoration, but all these people that were gathered around him. He was their leader. He was, according to Scripture, their captain. These are not military academy top candidate graduates. These were desperate people that were suffering, that were bitter, that were experiencing all kinds of anguish. So David not only had to lead his own transformation, but the transformation of these people. I'm going to let David preach this message for me tonight. Because when you look at the story, there are 3 things that stand out, at least to me. One of them before he got to the cave, and then 2 other things that stand out that I believe led to the restoration and the rebuilding of faith once again. Now, on David's way to Gath, before he went to the cave, he didn't spend that much time at all in Gath. He was chased out of there. Well, he chased himself out of there because he was exposed for who he was. Then he pretends to be a madman and they let him go. But let's just say on the way to the cave, he came to Nob, N-O-B, to Ahimelech, the priest. Nob is just outside of Jerusalem. And he asked Ahimelech if he had any weapons that he could have for a journey that he was going to take. He lies to Ahimelech the reasons why he doesn't have one, and also the reason why he had any provisions. He had nothing to eat. And Ahimelech happens to tell him, obviously David was not aware of it, that he had the sword of Goliath. And Ahimelech said that, David, you take it. You can have it. It's wrapped over there in a corner. You can take it with you if you need a weapon. Now think about it, folks. God has sometimes a strange sense of humor, a strange way of getting your attention. Here David's running in fear, and he asks for a weapon. And what does he get in return? The sword of Goliath, the very sword that cut off Goliath's head and brought Israel the victory. The sword that he defeated Goliath with, if you really think about it, it was a miraculous victory. Because the sword just took out his head. One stone knocked him down. One accurate placed stone right in the smack in the middle of his forehead knocked him out, and then David took off his head with Goliath's sword. Remember, David didn't have a sword. He came what we would call today, even though it's not exactly like that, a slingshot. 1 Samuel 21:9 reads, and the priest said, the sword of Goliath the Philistine, whom thou slewest in the valley of Elah, behold, it is here wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If thou wilt take that, take it, for there is no other save that here. Only one weapon there. And David said, there is none like that, give it to me. If you really think about it, God had prepared the very sword to be in David's path. I believe the first thing that he had exposed to him once again was really a testimony of his past and what God did for him. Because the very sword to be put in David's past as a testimony of God's faithfulness and reminder of the victory against all odds. If I was David, I was holding on that sword, and says, wow, I remember that day. God delivered Israel through my hands. He strengthened me. He gave me the ability. He guided that stone. He knocked down Goliath. And then, the very weapon that would finish off Goliath, he now is put back in my hand. Talk about one heck of a reminder. Imagine the flood of remembrance that probably filled David's head, reminding him that God at one time stood by him against a foe that nobody wanted to take on. Imagine that testimony that would be also to the 400 men that met up with David. Think about it. You don't think there was conversations going on? Hey, David, is that the sword that you killed? Or David may even mention it too. Is that the sword that killed Goliath? Or the sword that took off his head? Imagine the story that David could tell. Let's just call it testimony. Listen, there's a lot of cheap testimonies out there. Everybody's trying to give a testimony. Always reflects how bad they were. Not so much, and God deliver them. I like to reflect on testimonies that put more focus on what God does, because everybody has fallen short from the glory of God. We're all freaking sinners until we have a change of mind and God then uses us for His purposes. Everybody has a testimony. David had one heck of a one. What a testimony of how what God has done. As a reminder to David and as a testimony to the men that needed rehabilitation too, not just David. God could do it again and again and again. You go to Psalm 34. I have to hurry now because I'm running out of time. This hour seems to get shorter and shorter as the months go by. Psalm 34. We're going to read verses probably 4 to 6. This is a psalm that David wrote in the cave of Adullam. What is a psalm? It's a hymn. It's a song. It's a song. Just listen to this. Verse 4 says, I sought the Lord and He heard me and delivered me from all my fears. Place yourself in that cave. 3,000 years ago. And David's singing this. And you think he whispered it? Do you think he sang quietly? No, he sung this song. This is the way he would rehabilitate himself, and I believe others surrounding him at that time. I sought the Lord, He heard me, and delivered me from all my fears. They look unto Him and were lightened, and their faces were not ashamed. Who's they? This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all his troubles. Captain of this ragtag bunch was singing to them a testimony. I don't agree with the TPT translation all because I think they take too much liberty in how they translated the scriptures, but I do like how they present it. Not the only verse in that whole Bible that I think they got right. It reads, listen to my testimony. I cried to God in my distress, and He answered me. He freed me from all my fears. Gaze upon Him, join your life with His, and joy will come. You will never wear the shame face again. When I had nothing, desperate and defeated, I cried out to the Lord, and He heard me, bringing His miracle deliverance when I needed it the most. So in David's case, he had the testimony of the sword as an object lesson, not only to bring into remembrance of what God did for him. The very sword that ended that conflict at that time was now the sword, I like to call it the sword of remembrance. Because now as David goes in the cave, every time he puts that sword in his hand or just looks at it, he can refresh his memory of how great his God is compared to all the pagan gods that he was fighting against leading up to this time, and how his God delivered him, and how others could look upon it not as an idol or an icon, but as an instrument of remembrance to remind them, hey, he did it for David once. Now David's given a testimony that he could do it again as many times as needed. That's where the rehabilitation started. And then David goes on, because David was a man of praise. One thing you can say about David, he was a man of praise. He did it with all his heart because he pursued God. And against all odds and in despair, I believe David led men in worship. I don't talk much about it. Well, obviously you can see for yourself. Look at all the songs. These are my psalms. These are my hymns. These are my words. I write it for myself and for you as a testimony of how great our God is. I got sick of listening to the other stuff because it really didn't reach me. Very few did. Very few songs did. This reminds me of all the things that I have taught throughout the years. These hymns, these songs are my Goliath sword, or sword of remembrance. Not to mention I could turn on the teaching any time I want to listen to myself. They didn't have that luxury back then. David was a man of praise. Against all odds, like I said, and in despair, David led these men in worship. Why? Because he wanted them to start focusing back their attention on God, who deserved all the glory. I believe he taught the men that praise is an act of ascribing worth to God. No matter what the circumstance or what the environment looks like or feels like. Whether it's a hole in the ground or a palace. Let's have a praising heart that seeks God and acknowledges Him and gives Him all the glory. And David wrote many psalms in that cave. Psalm 29, I'm just going to read to you. Write these down because I won't have time. Psalms 29, verse 1 and 2. Ascribe to the Lord, O sons of the mighty. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Give to the Lord the glory due to His name. Worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness or in holy array. I want you to put flesh and blood on this. You could read right through that first part. Ascribe to the Lord, O sons of the mighty. Who's he talking to? Who's he singing to in that cave? Not just to himself, but what he's now declaring the sons of the mighty. And they would become mighty men. Ascribe to the Lord, O sons of the mighty. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Give to the Lord the glory due to His name. Worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness or in a holy array. Psalm 34, verse 1 through 3. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. His praise. People come up to me, oh, I thought you only have to have faith. Well, that's where it starts. Without faith, you're not going to even have a change of mind. But God's not a one-trick pony. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. I've said it many times. But it's also worshiping God, acknowledging God, praising God, thanking God, which I'll get to. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. My soul shall make its boast in the Lord. The humble shall hear of it and be glad. Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. Who's he singing to? Himself and these men. Psalm 57, 7 through 9. Another psalm written in that cave. My heart is steadfast. O God, my heart is steadfast. I will sing and give praise. Awake, my glory, awake, lute and harp. I will wake in the dawn. I will praise you, O Lord, among the peoples. I will sing to you among the nations. So write that down. First he had a testimony, then the praise. Write this down, number 3. Then the thanksgiving. See, David knew how to approach God. And David knew that thanksgiving was a step in approaching God's presence. I won't even have time to get into why that's a pattern in the tabernacle also in the Old Testament. Maybe another time. But you see that in Psalms 100. I told you David was going to preach this message. Psalms 100, verses 3 through 5. Know that the Lord, he is God. It is he who has made us, and not we ourselves. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving. Enter into his gates with thanksgiving. Enter the courts with praise. Be thankful to him and bless his name, for the Lord is good. His mercy is everlasting, and his truth endures to all generations. Psalms 92, verses 1 through 2. It is good to give thanks to the Lord and to sing praises to your name, O Most High, to declare your loving kindness in the morning and your faithfulness every night. Psalms 50, Psalms 50, verse 14 through 15, verse 14 through 15. Offer to God thanksgiving and pay your vows to the Most High. Call upon me in the day of trouble, and I will deliver you, and you shall glorify me. This is what these people were listening to. This is what these people were hearing. This is how these people became steadfast in the Lord once again. Or maybe for the first time, they became mighty men of God. Now there's a whole lot of Psalms written by David filled with testimony of God's faithfulness, praising and giving thanks to God. This is the kind of leadership, David's leadership of the 400 men, that led to their transformation. It was accomplished by focusing their faith on the majesty of the God that is worthy of all praise and thanksgiving. David was reminded that the God that delivered him before many times will deliver him again, and he would become king. Their praise had become bigger than their problems. Sometimes we get so down, so focused just in ourselves, that our problems become bigger than our praise, when it should be just the opposite. And when it's just the opposite, when our praise is bigger than our problems, we're no longer victims. Well, what happened to us, we're victims to victorious mighty men and women. That's why it's important to cultivate a lifestyle of thanksgiving and giving also. Even the medical world, I'll be done here in 5 minutes. Even the medical world has figured out the power of thanksgiving. I'll give you 5 points. There's many more, but I'll give you 5 points that the medical world has established why being thankful is important. 1, being thankful boosts your health by reducing depression, stress, lowering blood pressure, and producing more energy and greater optimism. Being thankful slows number 2, being thankful slows the aging process. In older adults, the daily practice of gratitude slows the effects of neural degeneration. 3, being thankful puts the brakes on stress. Cortisol, often called the stress hormone, is significantly lowered through positive emotions such as gratitude. 4, being thankful helps us bond with each other. Research shows that gratitude leads to a better relationship through an increased production of oxytocin, also known as the bonding hormone. 5, be thankful is good for the heart. Research shows that those who actively express thanksgiving can reduce blood pressure by 10%. See, God has designed us with the ability to experience transformation in every part of our lives. It happens by grace through faith, through the power of these tools that God has built in us, if we just tap into it. Well, that's David, that's Old Testament. Well, I think Jesus gave us a pretty good clue of what we should be doing also. Matthew 26. I'll just go to 2 or several verses, then I'm done. What happens at the Lord's table? Verse 27. And he took the cup, this is Jesus, and gave thanks. And gave it to them, saying, drink ye all of it. And then you go down to verse 30 in the same chapter. It says, and when they had sung a hymn, they went out into the Mount of Olives. What were they doing at that table of the Lord? In fact, if you have it ready, get Decontaminated ready for the end of the last song. I want that played. And when Jesus gave thanks, and then when we're through, they sung a hymn. Right before he went to Mount Olives, to bleed blood before the persecution and the cross. Mark 14. Just not in Matthew. You go to Mark 14. Verse 23, it says, and he took the cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, and they all drank of it. Remember, the cup represented his blood. He's thanking God the Father that he has the opportunity to rescue mankind through his blood. And we're thanking him because his blood rescued us. Because he's our Savior, and we put our trust and faith in him. And then you go down to verse 26, and when they had sung a hymn, or in this case, you can even put psalm in there, and when they had sung a hymn, they went out into the Mount of Olives. That's why I'm not a proponent of you just got to have faith. That's the obvious. But there's sometimes steps that you need to take to rehabilitate yourself back into being a faith warrior. David became that faith warrior after losing it. And the worst thing that ever could happen, be getting comfortable in the palace when a whole bunch of other mistakes would take place. And he sinned against God multiple times. But that's another story for another time. A lot of times rehabilitation starts with getting in the Word, Remember what the Word has done for you. That's your testimony. Start praising Him. I even give you those tools. That's why these hymns, faith come by hearing hymns, are available to you. We're not studying the Word, and if it's not interrupting anything else, as far as having company or things of that nature, have a song in your heart. If all it does is bring in remembrance what God has done for you, that's a better state to be in than fretting and fearing and all the other things that come along with life. And be thankful. That's why I say, go to the table of the Lord as many times as you can. Be thankful for what Christ has done for you. Remember what He's done for you. We need to approach Him with worship that's due to Him, with a thankful heart. And I believe no matter what the situation, it can be overcome. And it will fill you with peace that surpasses all understanding. You got it, folks? Play a song.
He set me free, no striving more, no burden like I knew before. Grace like a river covered me and broke the cords of slavery. He set me free, my soul can sing, I found my peace in Christ the King.